Robert Liu is the faculty director and principal investigator at Harvard University's LabXchange, a university-wide online education initiative. He founded HarvardX and is also a professor of molecular and cellular biology at Harvard. Please welcome Dr. Liu.
I have to say, as an early member of the edX family, and now increasingly of the Open edX family, there are continued surprises at the depth of talent. So the juggling piece is yet something new today. I'm really amazed by that. So I've spent a number of years as a MOOC builder, founding and building HarvardX, and we learned a great deal from it. But if some of you probably recall, one of the earliest things that was pointed out was this issue of completion. And there was much gnashing of teeth, and lots of people write things, oh God, MOOCs are dead, et cetera, because completion rates are so low. But that actually is not what that means at all. What that means is there is a different set of needs out there for many individuals when it comes to the consuming of learning content. And so one of the things that we've become very interested in is how do we think about personalized learning at scale? Because arguably one of the challenges of a course, and the massive open online course, I would say, will remain as valuable as ever, but it can now be complemented with things that are more personalized, that really allow a broader range of learners to make use of the enormous amount of content that I'm sure all of us in this room has invested in. And so personalized learning at scale, one of the approaches, of course, it started with MOOCs, but as I mentioned before, is a large course, even if it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 14 weeks, is that the right sort of size, if you will, of content that you need, and is it focused really appropriately or not? And so that was a question that we've been asking for some time, and we thought, what better platform to do it on than edX? Because when you combine both edX and Open edX, 60 million plus learners, and I think this is the first time I've actually put on a slide a number even more optimistic than Anant's. So I do that with pride. Because I think that is the correct number. 1,300 organizations and growing, all countries. So we are the largest open source learning platform in the world. So if anyone's interested, and I know all of you are, in doing something transformative in learning at scale, what other platform is there than ours? Right? So, what LabXchange represents is a real effort to see if we can move Open edX to another stage, to a next stage of evolution, where we'll be able to, in fact, create much more flexible learning experiences that can be personalized. And now the question is, when you think about personalized learning, of course, everyone talks about AI, right? Artificial intelligence personalization. And that is, of course, incredibly important. But I think we also need to start with HI, right? Human intelligence, personalization as well. And how can we try to achieve that? So the start of this really begins with the fact that we do have vast libraries of open educational resources. We have platforms that are primarily focused on that. We have platforms like edX, where a subset of content is OER. But when you look at OER and these millions of learning assets, you have videos, you have assessments, you have text, you have visualizations, but all of them are locked in very specific sequences called courses. But what is also true is that they're locked in these particular silos across different platforms. So what we have developed in really close partnership with edX and with OpenCraft, and I have to say, I know you all know this, but the Open edX community is one of the greatest family settings one could ever imagine for partnership to try and build something that's impactful. And so for us, working with edX very closely and with OpenCraft, what we've done is really tackled the module store of the edX platform of Open edX and proposed a replacement called the block store, where instead of things being locked into courses, they're broken up at the asset level to individual videos, individual problems, individual text documents, HTML pages, etc. So imagine, using OpenEdX, you combine all of these into a single dynamic repository that has now been granularized at a grain size that we've never seen before. And so you have all of these videos, text, graphics, simulations, etc., that can now be meta-tagged, can become completely searchable in a variety of ways. And then what you can do is, in fact, take from that, and you can start to think about what are the particular pieces of content that I'm interested in. So working with Hubble Studios, we have developed a sort of a UI UX that shows what LabXchange will be, launching in September. And so what we're now able to do is that with what's in the block store, we can now lay out individual assets. So these aren't courses, these are assets. We can arrange them in terms of where they're from, staff favorites, who the community has favored, what are trending topics. And then when you do a search, and a faceted search, you're able to pull up a whole variety of assessment components, of media types, of something called a case study, which I'll talk about actually this afternoon at a breakout session. And what this allows you to do now is pick from this library not courses, but individual learning assets for the first time. What this then allows you to do is remix them. You will have the power with those assets that have been released and authorized for remixing based on the Creative Commons sort of association that they have. With LabXchange, you can now drop them into a very lightweight version of an LMS that will be free and available, so you can actually resequence them as you see fit. You can also add your own unique user content, perhaps video, perhaps text, because one of the issues that has always stood in the way of remixing is that if you take assets out of a course that tells a particular learning narrative and dump them into something else, they won't make sense. But what do we do in the classroom when we draw readings and resources from everywhere? We tell a new story. So once again, building off what edX has already done in the authoring platforms, we can now, in fact, allow users to drop in their own story and rethread the content to basically tell a new learning narrative. So the idea is that you can link the content that you remix, and what you create is, in fact, a new learning pathway. This is something that now sits in addition to a course. It's not meant to replace a course. It's shorter, it's more focused, it's focused around perhaps a smaller subtopic, and it's, if you will, personalized, perhaps by a human, which can be a high school teacher. It can also be personalized by you. Now you can search and find various assets on a topic that you're interested in, and frankly, build your own learning pathway for your own use and for the use of others that you care about. So the learning pathways themselves will be structured in a relatively linear fashion in this way. We have indicated with that little gold notch things that you have added. So Mary has created this pathway. She's a high school teacher in biology in Massachusetts. She has created this pathway, and those two notched elements are things that she has authored, dropped into the platform so that she can tell the story that her students need to hear. When a student goes into the pathway and accesses an individual asset, what you will also see is that there is a connection in the upper right hand that links directly back to the source of the content. In this case, if it is drawn from edX and something released for remixing, they can view immediately the course syllabus, and they can enroll in the edX course directly from that asset. So there is a boomerang to the source of the asset that allows them to see the asset in original context, and if it's a course, enroll in that course, so on and so forth. What we've also done is that now at the level of an individual asset, you can discuss that individual asset. So for the first time now, students, learners, can in fact build discussions, and teachers can build discussions around individual assets. It will give us a data set on the efficacy and response of individual assets like we've never had before. So what we've done is that we've created a new environment where content can be reused in a variety of different ways, that as long as the content provider has released it in the appropriate Creative Commons licensing, this allows for the first time the ability to remix it and issue it with a unique URL that, let's say, a teacher can share with her class free of charge. Because one of our goals is to try to truly open up what is accessible in terms of this learning content. And for example, a partner on edX that contributes their content, this also allows them to have an entirely new lead generation structure where in fact their courses and the ability to enroll in their courses is now connected to individual assets which are fully searchable and findable for the first time. But that's not enough. Given what we have created, we're very interested in the communal and the collective side of learning as well. It is one thing that I think we have let lie on the table far too long in terms of online learning. And so what LabXchange is also seeking to do is to graft onto this new way of interacting with content and using it, the ability to create a learning network, where instead of sharing cat videos, what we ate last night, and our best optimized vacation photos, now what we can do is share what we have learned from. How easy, I mean, it's easy for us to perhaps find the ideas of others, the proposals of others, but how do we find what those individuals used to learn to create the proposal or the idea that they had? We have never effectively created a system where we stand on each other's shoulders based on what we have learned. And so this now allows us to share these learning pathways that can be built on LabXchange. Each individual can actually have a profile. And another structure that we have created is mentoring, so that now you can connect with mentees and you can be mentored in turn by others. You can share learning pathways with others. A teacher can actually create an environment for her class where she can each week build 1 or 2 learning pathways and share them with the class. All of the performance data flows back to the teacher. We have built these discussion boards using open source software, Discourse, which then allows you to, in fact, have full-on sort of discussions around specific topic areas, but also have discussions at the level of a large topic, an individual pathway, and an individual asset. So this will create sort of a network of response to learning content at various levels of grain size that we have never seen before. So one of the hopes that we have is that, among other things, this will create greater sharing not only of proposals and ideas to tackle challenges that you might be interested in, global challenges, but that it will really connect with what you have used to learn to actually do something. Right? So that learning becomes much more shareable than ever before. So why is this useful? So one thing that we're interested in is there are 1,000 flowers blooming around the world of different in-person programs and online programs that are tackling the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, so-called global challenges. There is no platform that allows you to actually see what the ideas are and to connect them globally. So with LabXchange, focused on the life sciences, we can do this. And so just one example, there's a program that is joint in between Harvard, Sciences Po, and the University of Paris, focused on the SDGs. And over the last 4 years, this program has developed 45 plus, almost 50 design proposals in almost every area one can imagine, focused on urban living, including, for example, Bubble Box that just won the Paris 2024 competition for innovation. They sit on a nice website, but how do you find it? How do you find it? So I mentioned before this new case studies type that we have developed as a content type, sort of a composite content type. Now all of these proposals and related proposals that focus on a particular problem will now have a common template, meta-tagged and searchable, that they can upload into the LabXchange environment, and that will sit comfortably on Blockstore. And what this will allow is that now you can search and find an idea that you're interested in. You'll find who did it. you'll find what they use to learn to actually do it. You can contact them through the platform and do something together to make a difference. So the hope is that what Blockstore on OpenEdX will allow us to do is truly create an environment for learning that is extremely flexible, that folks like Candice and her colleagues will be able to work with an entirely different set of data around how content is used and reused by instructors, by learners, how are things clustered in ways, how that aligns with performance, how that aligns with building proposals to solve problems, and what sort of networks can now form on a platform that allows you to network through learning and trying to solve problems versus cat videos and birthdays. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So this is LabXchange. We will launch, and by the way, we are focused specifically on the SDGs on good health and well-being because of our life sciences focus, quality education, and very importantly, what this room really represents are partnerships to actually meet global challenges, to actually meet those goals. So, LabXchange launches in September of 2019. The Blockstore rolls out over, in all likelihood, the next 2 releases of OpenEdX. We are seeking collaborators of any ilk that would like to talk to us about what we're doing, and this is supported generously by the Amgen Foundation and Harvard. So thank you, and I'd be happy to take questions. Please.
That was an absolutely brilliant and inspiring presentation. I'm really very, very taken with it. The question in my mind, it comes from a book of Neil Ferguson's I've just read about hierarchies and networks. You can do all sorts of wonderful things with networks, but as we know, if you look at Facebook or whatever you like, you can also do low-quality things, yes, or you can do negative things.
Yes.
So obviously at the top end, this is an inspiring network, and wonderful that you say anybody come and join, but you're going to have quality assurance. Yeah. You're going to have to say to people, yeah, we invited you, and we don't like what you do, or we yes, don't trust you, go away. How are you going to do the quality assurance? How are you going to say no to the people whose performance is not right or whose motives are incorrect?
Absolutely, great question. And we've thought a lot about this. Like everything else, you need to sort of build in small steps. Without question, the platform will be moderated. And so what we're doing right now is that we're forming partnerships with organizations like the Harvard Global Health Institute, for example, that has stepped forward to moderate all of the public health, global health content that goes on the platform. Now, this does represent potentially a bottleneck in terms of scaling, but there are a number of different models out there using peers, et cetera, of how you can get to scale in a more sort of a moderation-driven environment. We're going to explore and see what's possible, but we do have moderation panels and groups that are being set up that will tackle, specific kinds of content. Something else we're also really interested in as well, the learning network part of things. One of the things we're most excited about is that we're working with partners globally. And so for once, I think we will have an opportunity to not simply broadcast the great content perhaps we have built, but to invite, especially from the developing world, case studies and perspectives and pathways, new learning stories told that represent locally what they have done and what they need and what works for them. And so our hope is that for the first time, this will be a truly more egalitarian platform where it's about sharing and co-development versus just us broadcasting our great stuff to the world. So our hope is that we'll also, frankly, for everyone, create an opportunity to learn about, like for example, for me, I would love to see, the health case studies from all over Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, et cetera, that we can imagine, and perhaps I have a colleague or two that might be working in that area, but to give voice via a platform like this in the context of learning that's tagged and searchable and findable and reusable by let's say, everyone in this room, thousands of miles away from the author, is something I think I'm very excited about. Moderated, of course. Yes. Yes.
Hi, thanks for the very interesting talk.
Hi, Remy.
Yeah, so I'm Remy Sharrock from Telecom Paris Tech. And so I have three very quick questions. How do you index LTI content? Because it's very difficult to go into an LTI component and know where are the parts that you want to index for the search engine. Do you have any plan to export to any LMS like Canvas or Moodle the path? And how do you compare to Dart? Mm-hmm. So also what was implemented at Harvard, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
Digital assets for reuse
in teaching.
Right?
Yes. Well, so in fact, I can answer the second and the third question together. So DART is a fantastic project out of Harvard, and in fact, DART was partly born out of a study that HarvardX did, trying to figure out how can we make MOOC content more reusable, especially for residential classes. So DART, I would say, fairly has a focus on how do you take a universe of content and integrate that into your in-school learning management system, like Canvas, like Moodle, like Blackboard, so on and so forth. LabXchange has no particular intention or interest in docking with local learning management systems. We're less focused on course building and focused on this notion of pathway, and pathway that sits freely in a digital environment and can be accessed by anyone. And so we didn't want to lock down into any particular set of LMS environments. So I would say Dart is more focused in the residential space for now. We're much more focused sort of externally. We're very complementary, actually, together and work together at Harvard. Yeah. So in fact, my hope is that there will be some aspects of Dart, some aspects of LabXchange that will cross into the two platforms, and we're in full discussion of that right now. I'm on the stakeholder board of Dart, so we're working very closely together. Yes, your first question about LTI, we're working on it. Oh, whoops, sorry. That was the last question. Thanks, everyone.